Excellent. Thank you. And good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this session. I know it's getting towards the end of the day, so I really appreciate your time this afternoon. And the graphics feels appropriate for a 20-minute slot where we're looking to cover probably quite a lot. So, kind of rattle through a couple of different areas today. So we're going to start off by looking at how employee data can help to identify the employee benefits that will make a difference for your people. And then also how you can use that data to measure the return on investment for your business, and also how you can use that in terms of personalisation for that employee experience. And then Chris will look at the vital role that effective communication has in bringing that all to life for your employees. So to get things started in terms of data, you will all have very rich data in terms of your employees. So you can look through at your workforce through a number of different lenses. Age, earnings, gender, kind of region, any kind of number of different areas. But for the course of today and for this example, I'm going to look at workforce through the lens of age, just to give an idea of how the data that you hold can be used to shape your thinking around benefit designs and the needs of your employees. And this is the latest UK workforce data from ONS. And it kind of shows that for about 60% of the workforce over the age of 35, and generally, we're an ageing workforce, and so very much tilted and continuing to be tilted to that right-hand side. And I think for a lot of organisations, benefits generally have been built and designed around quite a traditional approach around this kind of very paternal kind of thinking about the long-term aspects of well-being and financial well-being and so on. But from a practical perspective, not all workforces are the same at all. So we do quite a lot of demographic modelling with our clients. This is a very simplistic approach, just looking at heat map data, just mapping age and earnings on a very simple two-axis approach. And the darker spots show where the concentrations are in terms of age and earnings. And you can see here on the right-hand side, we've got a retail sector organisation with a huge population of younger, lower-earning employees. The middle is an engineering firm which has a very clear kind of linear trajectory of ages and earnings through their workforce, with quite a spike in that in the older age group. And on the right-hand side is a financial services employer with two very distinct populations in the kind of younger and older and different earnings categories. So even though the UK workforce as a whole is quite a homogenous thing, at an individual employer level, there are very, very distinct differences. So a one-size-fits-all approach to reward definitely doesn't fit into these different organisations. And what we're seeing with organisations across all sectors is very clear focus around needing to attract new talent into the business, needing to keep the talent that you've got, and getting that motivational piece right with employees of all across the spectrum of the workforce. And if you don't understand who your workforce is and what that workforce looks like, how do you get that messaging right for who you are trying to engage, attract and retain? So when you come to think about then, how can this data make a difference to, or the data be influenced, the benefits that make a difference to your employees? We're definitely seeing some very strong trends towards thinking about benefits that support outcomes for employees rather than benefits just for the sake of products and services. So when you start playing this against sort of some of the wider themes, again, looking at UK data, some very stark pictures start to come out in terms of key points in people's lives. So when you look at home ownership data, this is information from the FCA's Financial Lives Survey. In the 18 to 24-year-old category, only 10% of people own their own homes. But when you look at the 25 to 34-year-old category, that number has shot up to 52%. So if you have a load of employees that are in that mid-20s to 30 category, probably one of the most important kind of focuses in their life will be thinking about that home ownership. Because during that phase, there's a spike in ownership from 10% to 50%. Massive, massive change in a relatively kind of small part of the demographic. If we look at families and childbirth, again, ONS data, 60% of parents, male and female, 60% of children born to parents under the age of 35 years old, and 90% born under the age of to employees under 40 years old. So again, thinking about your workforce and the issues that they might be facing, how do your benefits and your reward and your culture kind of support employees? If you have a large cohort of people in this age group, how do you support those kind of massive changes that are going through in terms of their life outside of work? And we see this in terms of where we do see voluntary benefits provided. This is examples across our own clients from a flexible benefits perspective, looking at different employee selections of, in this case, these are protection benefits. So buying additional life cover, critical illness cover, partner critical illness and dental. Big spikes in the effectiveness and the usage of things like the protection benefits, in particularly between the ages of 30 and 50. When employees are starting to have those things to protect in their lives, whether that's family or homes and so on. So just thinking about those touch points that employees have in their lives can have a very big impact in that, are you providing the right kind of benefits and policies and procedures to support them in those things that matter? Clearly we're looking from a benefits perspective, but increasingly that could be helping people with time off or financial support around moving home. Parental leave is a high impact issue for most employers out there. And this is just about aligning what you're doing with the needs of your employees. And at the other end of the spectrum, 63% of unpaid care is given by people between the ages of 40 to 69. And it's estimated that 1 in 5 workers over the age of 50 will be providing unpaid care of some form or another. Again, what are you doing in terms of recognising that through things like elder care support or even around things like flexible working? And we see, the dark blue line here again in terms of flexible benefit selections is holiday buy. And we do see increasingly older parts of the workforce wanting to have more flexible time, looking at things like sabbaticals and so on, in order to not just in terms of leisure time, but also to be able to be engaging and providing support for family outside of work. And this is a bit of a busy graph, but it's not just in terms of the benefits you provide, but also the content and education that you provide as well. So this graph is some data captured by Nudge, a financial education provider, and what they're able to do is to measure the kind of content that people engage with depending on the demographics of those people. So this is splitting that down by age. And this is effectively showing that for younger people, they are not interested at all in really information about things like pensions. We kind of think, no big surprise there, but the data becomes really powerful. People are only engaging with pensions information once they get beyond about 45 or 50. But when you think about the financial educational support that you have in the workforce, how much of it is focused on things like budgeting, saving, house buying, and how much of it is focused on pensions, and is that appropriate to the mix that you've got within your workforce? So it's not just about the products, it's also about the content. I told you this was quite a whistle-stop tour. I'll be very happy to take questions as we go through this along the way. So you've got this data and you're looking at it in terms of how you shape and design the benefits, but how can you use that same information to support the business case and make sure that you're spending money in the right places from a practical point of view as well? And there are a number of ways in which I'm sure you can or do measure return on investment. This is maybe one of the more traditional ways. We're looking here, this is a graph mapping total well-being spend. So in this case, the yellow bar is income protection, the blue bar is PMI, and the pink is prevention spend like screening and so on. And what we're doing here is mapping over that, the absence levels of the business and also of sector information. And by looking at this kind of direct spend on well-being type services and mapping that against absence trends, you can potentially then start to measure direct return on investment. For example, so in this case, this is a kind of anonymised, slightly dummied client data, but payroll of £150 million, absence ratio is 1.8%. So your cost of absence in the workforce is £2.7 million. Over the 5-year average, though, that's improved by 0.8%. So it's £120,000 of direct absence improvement if you're measuring that. And there's great sector data available from example CIPD. If you play that information against there, how you're doing against the sector, potentially can have some quite big deltas that you can then show to your business of what you are driving in terms of the return on investment from the processes that you have. And there's some interesting work by Deloitte specifically looking at mental well-being, but they estimated that direct absence costs are only about a quarter of total absence costs when you take into account the costs of presenteeism and then the knock-on impacts on manager time and effectiveness and overall productivity. So if you've a direct absence cost of benefit of £120,000, that could easily be, a productivity gain of £500,000. So again, just an opportunity to use health data and absence data and start to overlay them if the quality of data and availability of information is good enough to start getting some real inputs. And what we're now starting to see is looking at not just financial return on investment, but thinking about how your benefits can align with some of those wider objectives that you might have in an organisation. And we're starting to see in particular things like the green agenda and emissions being some hard targets within organisations and reward teams, not necessarily being challenged at the moment, but starting to be involved in conversations around how does our reward and benefit strategy kind of align with our global corporate and social responsibility agenda. And if you look across your benefits in the round, particularly those voluntary benefits that might have an ESG overlay, there is no reason why you can't start to extrapolate the participation data that you have and turn that into some form of emissions benefit dashboard for your business. So, for example, pension scheme providers now will be able to tell you per £1 million of pension fund what the carbon emissions are from that fund. So simple mathematics of multiplying your fund by the emissions will give you a total carbon emissions for that year for your pension scheme. And with that information, you can then map year on year how is the total impact of your company's pension scheme doing in terms of net impact on emissions. Electric vehicles broadly take out about 7 tonnes of emissions a year from the emissions, in terms of carbon emissions. So every employee that moves to an electric vehicle potentially has that benefit. And you can do the same across cycle to work, carbon offset and so on. So use your data to support the information, whether that's financial or other objectives that you have. It really has an opportunity to support the wider objectives of the business. And then from a final perspective, in terms of how you can use that data to kind of start to personalise experiences for your employees, one of the things I'm sure everyone gets familiar with is when you engage in things like Netflix and personal content, you get asked to express your preferences. What type of films or shows do you enjoy? What kind of genre? And depending on that information, for example, Netflix will start to show you for exactly the same show, in this case, Stranger Things. Depending on your preferences, you will get a slightly different image in terms of how that attracts you to that program. And you can take the same kind of concept, starting to ask your employees their preferences, and start to then give them content and arrange your benefits in a particular way to play against their preferences and the things that are likely to have an impact most. And that gives you then a fantastic foundation to start really engaging and bringing those benefits to life. I'll pass over to Chris to tell you more.
Thanks very much. Okay, so I'm going to look at this from a communication perspective, and by communication I don't mean broadcasting information, I mean making a connection with people. Hopefully you've all had a good session today. By the looks of things, it all looks like people have got a lot from it, but I'm hoping that you're not here to look at apps and systems and processes, or certainly not just that. Ultimately, I'm hoping that you're here because you are looking to create an environment within your organisation where people feel cared for, looked after, they feel emotionally invested in the success of the organisation, and they are engaged, because ultimately that's why we're here today. We're focusing on the people. What is it about the people, and how can the people in your organisation, and how can you communicate benefits, well-being, reward and recognition opportunities to really make a meaningful connection to those individuals. I'm a marketer by trade. I work for a company called Caburn Hope, which is a specialist employee communications agency, and we talk about emotional communication versus transactional communication a lot. So many, and I'm going to say you are the exception, I'm sure, to the rule, but in a lot of organisations, HR, particularly reward and benefits, focus communication on the transactional aspects. You need to get the process right, and the systems and the policy. Absolutely, it's fundamental. But but it doesn't necessarily drive emotional connection and emotional investment. And that's where that emotional aspect, what is it that makes it inspiring and meaningful and personalised and dynamic and relevant to those individuals, that really gets people connected and emotionally invested in the future success of the organisation. So ensuring that you've got those two aspects are really key. I'm conscious that I don't have enough time to really talk about all of this in detail. Afterwards, though, we do have a stand at the Buck stand, and there is admittedly non-alcoholic, but gin and tonics that are available. So please do come and ask us some questions afterwards. All I'm going to use the next few minutes is to give a few top tips in terms of my experience of how to start to then, once Mark's been talking about the importance of the data and the insight and having the systems and the processes in place, which is great, but then how do you really tell the story that starts to get people excited and engaged and inspired about that communication? We look out in marketing world. Apple doesn't sell iPhones using a series of transactional benefits. Up to 1,200 nits. I've got young kids, I don't want nits in my house. That's not how they sell a series of transactional benefits. They sell a story, they sell the benefits, they sell a dream, and that's why they do it. And they don't do that because it's nice to use images. They do it because they're worth $3 trillion. It's a very successful business because they are looking to sell a product. And as far as I'm concerned, communicating with employees about their career should use the same kind of approach and methodology as communicating to consumers about a product. But what's great about us is that we get to talk to human beings with hopes and dreams and aspirations and not just demographics. But the thinking is exactly the same when it comes to that. So I'm just going to very quickly go through our approach. And this gets used in marketing world all the time, but there are 3 tiers to communication. You need to have the informed level, which is the need to know systems and processes. But what gets missed a lot is the inspire piece. What is the value? How are we going to really inspire people and paint that picture of the future? What does that look like? And then the bit in between, again, a lot of communication within organisations is very one way, it's broadcast. In order to really engage with people, it has to be a two-way conversation. People need to have a voice and feel like they understand and that they have a part to play in the organisation. I always use this example, I'm not quite sure, but out in marketing world, Dyson adopts this kind of approach. Their inspire level is about British engineering, bagless technology, being sustainable, being good for the environment. Their inform level is a video to show you how to change your filter. But how to change your filter doesn't sell vacuum cleaners. It's the inspire piece that tells the story, that gets people excited. And that's what I really want to just get across today. So a few areas to really focus on for that. So the inspire piece is about making emotional connections. What can you focus on? So have a story. When it comes to well-being isn't an app, it's not a process or a policy. It should be a frame of mind, and it should be an attitude that's lived and breathed throughout the whole organisation. So have a story, and a story that is relevant to your business and to aligns with your purpose and your values, that really paints a picture of the future and shows that people are cared for and that they are valued. Make it feel real. Share success stories through real people. Storytelling is always going to be the best way to get these kinds of messages across. Make it feel and make it real and make it meaningful. Business-led, if you can get your leaders involved in this and get people and get champions within the organisation, it always tends to get greater traction when something comes from the HR department, in my experience in a lot of organisations. But you can be the engine room that is driving that, but having that business, this buy-in is really, really key. The second piece is about making social connections. So ensure that you're driving it from people, as I say, empowering them to take ownership, take control, use technology to help to harness that so that people feel part of it and that they understand and appreciate the benefits and the reward that they receive within organisations. In my experience, and I talk to people in organisations every day, generally people's understanding of benefits and awareness is pretty low within organisations. A lot of the time it's stuff that they only find out about when they need it, which is a shame, and being able to communicate in a more open way. And also, it's not always appropriate. I know that there are some serious elements to wellbeing communications, but have a bit of fun with it. If it's appropriate for your culture, you can, and it's the having fun piece that's going to make a real impact and stand out above the noise of the sheer wealth and volume of communications that your employees will be receiving day in, day out. Like final piece, I can see the red light, so I'm out of time, but is about the practical connections. Still really important, make it simple. It really needs to be simple and easy to understand. no jargon, make it visual. Good rule of thumb is that we do a lot of work around ensuring that there's information that people can read, watch and listen. So you are accepting and being inclusive and accessible when it comes to communication. Make it personal. Use that data. Data's only as good as the insight and what you do with it. Otherwise, it's just a spreadsheet, and it needs to be focused on how do you target and make things personal and meaningful to individuals. And then the last piece, we've spoken about technology, which is really important and it can really help. But don't forget the human touch. I think a lot of organisations outsource responsibility to systems, and I think a lot of the time that is it's a mistake because having the people, we all know that one of the key reasons, I think it's still the top reason that people leave their business is because they don't get on with their line manager and they have a negative experience. So being able to train line managers, thinking about them as a channel, helping them to drive positive messages about well-being and about reward and about benefits and about that connection and how it fits within the employee life cycle is really, really key. I'm out of time, so I'm not going to go into this in any real detail, but I'm happy to share it afterwards. A couple of examples from an organisation that we work with, big software and retailer. This was a piece of work around actually using a survey to help to raise awareness of the benefits that they provided. And it was all based around conjoint analysis. So what do you prefer, this or this? And through that campaign, we helped to raise awareness of the benefits that were provided. We thought about the channels that they use. So there's a few examples of some banners. We did some competitions to start to raise a bit of a buzz in advance of the campaign. They also use Slack very extensively within the business. So we actually, as part of the campaign, put a series of graphics where people could only respond using emojis, which, if anyone who uses Slack, is very much the language of the business. So that was very much the focus, and we had a bit of fun with it. This is Roberta, the benefits unicorn, who helps to communicate these various different aspects. It's not going to work for everybody, but it works for this organisation in a way that we can just start to be a bit lighter and a bit more fun and a bit more personal and a bit more human, and also reflect the values and the culture that this organisation is really trying to create. One more minute, I promise. So where to start? Listen to your people. I'm hoping that you do, but people's feelings change, so listen to them and then listen again, and make sure that they know that they are listened to and that change is happening as a result. Think about that story, that narrative, that manifesto. What do you want to stand for? What does well-being mean within your organisation, and how do you want people to feel as a result of it? That comes from knowing your people, knowing your audience, the various different groups. Mark mentioned demographics and those kinds of aspects, which is incredibly important, but roles and locations and nuances, and if you've worked within organisations that have got legacy brands or acquisitions, have an understanding of those aspects and talk about it. And then the final piece, consider your channels. I believe that the channels that you use within an organisation reflect the culture that you're looking to drive. So think about that from a perspective of being more digitally savvy or being more open or transparent. The channels that you focus on, that you use, will really help to drive that kind of emotional focus. That's it. Sorry, that's whistle stop.